where the future comes alive through immersive storytelling. In today's episode, we present Steppin Razor by Crool, a gritty tale of revenge, morality, and what it means to be a hero. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more captivating science fiction and cyberpunk tales. Now, let's begin.
Steppin Razor by Crool. Part 1. The Job. Mason Raze Carter gripped the steering wheel of the extremely customized forward trimmer, better known as the Steppin Razor, as it hummed steadily beneath him on its 35-inch polyalloy nanotube reinforced KO2s. The neon-soaked streets of the megacity blurred past his windows, the rain streaking the windshield like teardrops that the city could no longer cry. The city had no tears left, only the steady pulse of greed and corruption pumping through its towering corporate arteries. 35 years in this world, and Raze had finally learned one thing. You don't beat the system, you hack it. And when you hack it, you don't ask for forgiveness. You don't give them a chance to bury you before you bury them first. The dashboard flickered as encrypted messages and data streamed across the holo screen in front of him. The coordinates, the mark. Another corp OXEC drowning in blood, money, and arrogance. Hyperion Systems. They thought they were untouchable. All of them. They thought that when they scapegoated his mentor, Daniel Trask, the best cybersecurity director in the city, the one who taught Raze everything. They had gotten away clean. The corporal gods had decided Trask was the sacrificial lamb, just another cog to grease their gears. He'd taken the fall for a security breach, a monumental failure engineered by Hyperion itself to sweep a much darker secret under the rug. And they had the gall to hang Trask out in front of the city, ruin his name before stringing him up like a common thief. That was the last time Raze had worn a suit. He ground his teeth and tapped a few commands into the hardened Android auto console that he had spliced into Steppin Razor's main data bus. The navigation synced with the data he'd siphoned off the dark nets earlier that morning. His target for the night? Gerald Thorne, head of Hyperion's cybersecurity division. Thorne had overseen the execution of Trask's career and his life. Raze had been a silent witness to it all, forced to watch from the shadows while the corporation dismantled a man he owed everything to. Tonight, he'd returned the favor. The Steppin Razor growled as it powered through the alleyways, weaving between holo advertisements and flickering neon signs. The truck was built for more than just the streets. Raze had customized every inch of it, from the onboard tactical computer to the electromagnetic shielding. It could take a rocket blast and keep driving. Not that he expected any of the corporate security drones to pack that kind of firepower, but Raze considered EM shielding much like he did four-wheel drive or condoms. You may never need it, but you will be glad you have it if you ever do. As he neared the Hyperion Tower, the skyline shifted, rising from the grunge of the lower districts into the slick, polished gleam of the corporate heights. The towers loomed over the city like gods, their logos glowing bright in the rain-soaked sky. Every floor of glass reflected the misery below, where the rats scurried through the trash heaps and fought over scraps of tech they barely understood. Hyperion Systems, one of the biggest and the worst. They controlled half of the city's critical infrastructure, from finance to public surveillance. In a city like this, privacy was a myth, but that didn't matter to Raze. He didn't need privacy. He was the guy who broke through it. His neural interface buzzed, the familiar tingling sensation in the back of his neck, a reminder that his custom rig was online, ready for action. He felt the stir of adrenaline, the familiar high before the plunge. He parked the Steppin Razor in an alley across from the tower and got to work. The old Raze would have stormed in, relying on brute force. But the new Raze, the rogue Raze, played the long game. He pulled a small black case from the passenger seat, opened it, and placed a sleek device on his wrist. A cyberdeck, one of the most powerful on the black market. His lifeline. His weapon. Thorne would never see it coming. The Corp drones guarding the Hyperion system. They were nothing. puppets on strings, running preset algorithms too predictable to pose a real challenge. Raze would slip in, strike, and slip out, leaving a trail of digital wreckage behind him. He tapped into the city grid, diving into a sea of data. Neon lit up the interior of the truck as code flashed across his retinal display, his eyes tracking every line. Firewalls melted under his fingers, defenses that would take lesser hackers hours to crack. For him, it was a warm-up. The corporate network opened before him like a flower of steel petals, each layer peeling back with a satisfying shiver. He was close now. Thorn was inside, cozy in his penthouse office. Raze could almost hear the bastard breathing. So arrogant, and so oblivious to what was coming. Raze smirked to himself. Time to show you the real meaning of security. His fingers danced across the interface as the hacking began in earnest, a ballet of ones and zeros swirling at his command. It would be over soon. The job. Simple. Get in, dig up the dirt, ruin Thorn's life, and leave him as wrecked as Trask had been. But Raze was just getting started. Part 2. The Cyber Raid. The digital walls of Hyperion systems rose before him, an endless labyrinth of firewalls, encryption algorithms, and dead-end protocols. Any normal hacker would have broken themselves against those defenses, but Raze was anything but normal. He was the ghost in the machine, the rogue operator that knew every crack, every weakness. Raze sat in the dim glow of his truck's dashboard, the Steppin Razor idling like a wild beast waiting to be unleashed. The cyberdeck on his wrist pulsed with power, syncs to his neural interface, making his mind one with the code he manipulated. Through the flickering green of his retinal display, he saw the corporate architecture stretch out before him like a fortress in cyberspace, each node and firewall. A piece of the puzzle he would dismantle. His fingers hovered over the control pad, and with a silent command, the assault began. He launched his first wave of attacks, blitzing through security layers faster than the automated defenses could register. To anyone monitoring the network, it would look like static, a brief blip on their systems. Then, nothing. His entry point would remain hidden until it was too late. Too easy, he muttered. Raze wasn't just hacking Hyperion's network. He was gutting it like a surgeon carving away the unnecessary tissue to expose the rotten core. Each line of code he manipulated pushed him deeper into their data centers, closer to the prize. Beneath his cool exterior, his mind raced, calculating every possibility, every countermeasure. He wasn't the type to leave anything to chance. He tunneled through the outer layers of the system, bypassing their weaker entry points. First, he scrambled the drone patrol signals around the building, creating gaps in their patrol routes. Then he turned his attention to the building's access points, unlocking doors and disabling keypads remotely. The Hyperion building's defenses were built on automation. Their downfall was trusting it. As the code unfurled before him, his mind wandered for a second. He thought of Trask, how they'd found him swinging from a beam in his sterile corporate apartment, neck snapped in a suicide that fooled no one. They'd cleaned it up so neatly, erased the evidence so thoroughly. The official story was airtight, but Raze knew better. He could almost hear Trask's voice, calm and steady, teaching him how to see through the digital chaos, how to navigate the smoke and mirrors that corporations love so much. Always dig deeper, Mason. It's never what it seems. The memory snapped into place like a bullet in the chamber, and Raze focused again. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about Thorn. It was about breaking the system that had swallowed them all whole. Thorn was just the next domino. The screen flashed red. He'd reached the core. Hyperion's most sensitive data lay ahead, corporate secrets, dark deeds buried beneath layers of encryption. And right there, at the center of it all, the files that would lead him to the truth behind Trask's downfall. He knew it wouldn't be simple, but that was where the fun started. He smirked as he deployed the next stage of his attack. Black Ice. Cutting-edge defensive AI meant to neutralize intrusions. Activated, launching a brutal counterattack. The AI lashed out, seeking to trace his signal, to burn out his cyberdeck before he could do any real damage. But Raze was ready. He danced around the Black Ice's attempts to lock him out, flicking away its claws like an afterthought. His mind raced, his vision filled with bursts of light and code as he outmaneuvered the system, weaving through traps designed to fry lesser hackers. This was where he excelled, facing down the best defenses money could buy and reducing them to nothing. He unleashed a worm, custom built by one of Chiba City's finest black market malware slicers, to latch onto Hyperion's core systems, designed to spread through their data centers like a virus. The worm would eat through their security logs, wipe out traces of his presence, and deliver the data he needed straight to him. The beauty of it was that they wouldn't even notice. Until it was too late. With the worm in place, Raze felt a surge of satisfaction. But he wasn't done yet. No half measures. He switched tactics, launching a more aggressive assault on their public infrastructure. The power grid faltered for a moment. Small systems blinked offline. It was enough to sow chaos without raising immediate alarms. Just a taste of what was to come if Hyperion didn't crumble on its own. Some would suffer, sure, but Raze had learned a long time ago that collateral damage was just part of the game. The corporate elite had been doing it for years. This was just their medicine, fed back to them. Forcefully, the system shuddered as his virus spread, rapidly eating through their defenses. At this rate, the Hyperion network would implode in a matter of hours. Raze leaned back, watching the havoc unfold on his display. He could almost hear the XX scrambling, calling their underlings to fix what couldn't be fixed. It was poetic in a way. These giants brought low by a single rogue operator. His HUD pinged, flashing an encrypted folder. He reached out with his mind, pulling it toward him, the data streaming into his cyberdeck. The files unfolded on his display. Names, projects, secret transactions. And there, buried within layers of cover-ups, was Trask's file, classified, sealed. The details were enough to make Raze's blood run cold. The breach had been no accident. Hyperion had orchestrated it. They'd engineered a disaster so they could push their next big project. Nexus AI, a system designed to control the city's infrastructure, its people, and its future. Trask had stumbled onto it. That's why they'd framed him. The Nexus AI wasn't just an upgrade. It was a takeover, a digital stranglehold that would give Hyperion control over every piece of technology in the city, from traffic systems to surveillance drones, from financial markets to personal devices. Holy shit, Raze whispered. This was bigger than he'd imagined. The pieces clicked into place. Hyperion had hung Trask out to dry to cover up the AI's true purpose, and now they were on the verge of launching it. Once they did, the city would be theirs. A wave of anger surged through him, but it was quickly replaced by cold calculation. He had what he needed. The worm had done its job. Hyperion systems were teetering on the brink of collapse. Now it was time for Thorn to pay the price. Part 3. The Confrontation. The city's underbelly passed in a blur of neon and shadow as the Steppin Razor roared toward the towering monolith of Hyperion systems. Raze's pulse matched the rhythm of the rain-slicked streets. Fast, focused, lethal. He had the files. He had the proof. All that was left was to deliver the final blow. Gerald Thorn, head of Hyperion Cybersecurity, the man who'd orchestrated the downfall of Daniel Trask. Raze's mind pulsed with the thought of that bastard's face, smug behind layers of corporate power and hidden agendas. It was time to tear down the facade. Brick by brick, Hyperion's tower loomed ahead, rising like an obsidian dagger into the night sky, its mirrored windows reflecting the chaos of the streets below. The tower stood in stark contrast to the filth at its base. Down there, people fought for survival, their lives ruled by the whims of the corporate elite. Up here, men like Thorn pulled the strings, safe in their ivory prisons. Raze parked the Steppin Razor a block away, pulling into a shadowy alley beside a row of flickering neon billboards. He slipped a hand beneath his jacket, checking the feel of the pistol holstered against his ribs. It wasn't just code he'd be slinging tonight. The rain had stopped, but the air hung heavy with moisture, shimmering in the glow of the streetlights. Raze pulled up his hood, the neural interface embedded in his jacket buzzing with the connection to his cyberdeck. He scanned the street for corporate patrols, drones, security teams, maybe even private mercs. but saw nothing. His earlier hacks had already disabled most of their security protocols. He was a ghost moving through a world that didn't even know he was there. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was almost too easy. Without his hacks, Hyperion's security would fried anyone else attempting to infiltrate. But with their defenses offline, Raze simply walked in. There were no guards, no checkpoints. They trusted their tech too much, and now it was going to cost them. The doors slid open with a soft chime, and Raze stepped into the penthouse. The place was a cathedral of chrome and glass, cold and sterile, its opulence a stark contrast to the city's grime below. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire megacity stretched out, a sea of lights and smog. The towers of other corporations flickered in the distance, their logos illuminating the night like beacons of greed. And there, standing at the window with a glass of expensive liquor in hand, was Thorn. He was exactly as Raze remembered. Tall, lean, and draped in a designer suit that screamed money and power. His hair, slicked back with meticulous precision, gleamed in the faint light. Thorn didn't turn as Raze entered. He didn't need to. He knew. "You're late, Carter," Thorn said, his voice smooth and composed, as if this were just another business meeting. "I expected you sooner." Raze's hand twitched at his side, itching to pull his gun, but he held back. Thorn wasn't a man you shot in the back. He was a man you made suffer, the way Trask had suffered. "I had some business to take care of," Raze replied, his voice tight with the controlled fury bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "You know how it is," Thorn chuckled, finally turning to face him. His eyes were cold, calculating, eyes that had seen men like Trask fall and hadn't blinked. "I know exactly how it is," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "So, have you come to kill me? Or are you here to play the hero? Save the city from the big bad corporation?" Raze took a step forward, his jaw clenched. "I'm no hero," Thorn smiled, a thin, predatory smile. "That much is clear. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. I know what you've done, Carter. The power grids you've crashed, the lives you've disrupted. All for what? Revenge? You think this is about Trask?" Raze's fingers flexed, the memory of Trask's hanging body flashing before his eyes. "It's always been about Trask." Thorn's smile widened. "That's where you're wrong. Trask was a casualty, an unfortunate but necessary one. He got too close to something he shouldn't have, and that something is Nexus AI," Raze shot back. "I've seen the files, Thorn. I know what Hyperion's planning. You're going to use Nexus to control the city. Every system, every network, every person. You'll be the ones pulling the strings, running the whole goddamn show." Thorn didn't flinch. "Nexus isn't just control, Carter. It's evolution. The city is a mess of inefficiency, corruption, and chaos. Nexus will bring order, peace, peace." Raze spat the word like poison. "You mean slavery?" Thorn shook his head, taking another sip of his drink. "You're thinking too small. Nexus will streamline everything. Traffic, infrastructure, commerce, security. It will eliminate poverty, crime, suffering. Sure, a few sacrifices will have to be made, but that's always the case, isn't it? You, of all people, should understand that." Raze's blood boiled. Thorn was twisting it, justifying the hell they were about to unleash on the city. "Sacrifices, huh? Like Trask." "Like Trask," Thorn confirmed without hesitation. He didn't see the bigger picture. "He got in the way. You're smarter than that, Carter. You know what's coming. The city's on the brink of collapse. Nexus is the only thing that can save it." Raze stepped closer, his hand brushing the grip of his pistol. "Save it for who, Thorn? The core O's. The ones who've already bled this city dry." Thorn's smile faded, and for the first time, his eyes darkened. "For everyone? The Koros are just the start. Once Nexus is operational, we'll have control. Real control. And once we have that, the city will change. For the better." Raze's heart pounded in his chest. The city, this mess of neon and concrete, this sprawling machine of human misery, it wasn't just going to fall. It was going to be remade, remolded into something worse. Thorn was right about one thing. The city was on the brink, but the solution wasn't Nexus. It wasn't another layer of chains around people's necks. The gun was in his hand now, cold and heavy. I'm not going to let that happen. Thorne's eyes narrowed. And what will you do, Carter? Kill me. That won't stop Nexus. It's already in motion. Kill me, and another will take my place. The machine keeps running. You can't stop it. Raze raised the pistol, pointing it at Thorne's chest. His finger hovered over the trigger. I don't need to stop it. Just make sure it doesn't happen on your watch. Thorne's smirk returned, a final flicker of arrogance before the end. Then pull the trigger. Do it. But you'll still lose. Raze didn't hesitate. The gun roared, the sound deafening in the glass and steel penthouse. Thorne's body jerked, the blood splattering across the pristine windows. He collapsed, the glass slipping from his hand, shattering on the floor. Raze stood over him, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. He looked down at Thorne's lifeless form, the man who'd ruined his mentor, who tried to reshape the world in his own twisted image. The Nexus AI was still out there, still coming. Killing Thorne wouldn't stop it. But it was a start. He turned, leaving the penthouse in silence, the neon lights of the city stretching out before him. The real fight was just beginning. Part 4. Choices. Raze stepped out of Hyperion's tower into the cold embrace of the night. The city stretched before him, a living beast of neon veins and shadowed arteries, pulsing with a rhythm all its own. The rain had started again, soft at first, then heavier. It soaked the streets in a murky haze, casting shimmering reflections of advertisements and traffic lights across the cracked asphalt. The kill should have brought satisfaction, but it didn't. Thorne was dead, but the threat wasn't over. Nexus AI wasn't just an idea. It was already in play, crawling its way into the city's systems. If Hyperion flipped the switch, the city would fall into their control by sunrise. Raze walked back to the Steppin Razor, his mind racing. Thorne had been right about one thing. Killing him didn't stop the machine. Hyperion still had its claws deep in the city, and the Nexus AI was the crown jewel of their operation. But Raze wasn't done yet. He still had the virus. He slid into the driver's seat, the interior of the Steppin Razor lighting up as his neural interface connected to the onboard android auto. The data he'd siphoned from Hyperion servers appeared before his eyes, scrolling across the HUD in streams of code. The virus he'd built was ready, fully loaded and waiting to be unleashed. It wasn't a simple kill switch. The virus was surgical, designed to cripple the Nexus AI before it ever went live. But it came with a cost. If he deployed it, the AI would go down, sure. But so would the city's infrastructure. Power grids, public transport, communications networks. All of it would be wiped in the crossfire. Millions of people would be thrown into chaos. The weak, the old, the vulnerable, they'd be the ones to suffer. He tapped a few keys. The virus hovering at the edge of deployment. His heart pounded in his chest. This was the choice, the trolley problem. Sacrifice the few to save the many, or do nothing and let Hyperion have its way. Either way, people would die. His hand hovered over the control panel, hesitating for the first time in years. Was he really willing to pull the trigger on this? To send the city spiraling into chaos? Just to stop Hyperion? The rain battered the windshield harder, like a drum beat building to a crescendo. He could feel the weight of it. The decision, the power, the destruction it would cause. But he wasn't a man who flinched. He was the hacker who brought the system down, the one who made the hard choices. Least productive, huh? Raze muttered to himself, the least productive members of society. That's how the corpus saw them. Expendable, dispensable, a drag on the profit margins. If he used the virus, he could target specific segments, cut out the dead weight, focus the damage, make the corpus suffer the most. The elite, the powerful, they'd be the ones to burn. He tightened his grip on the wheel. The trolley problem, Raze thought. Except Raze wasn't like everyone else. He didn't care about saving everyone. Or anyone. He only cared about burning the right people. He initiated the countdown. The virus hit the Nexus AI like a firestorm. Raze's cyberdeck lit up with a barrage of warnings and alarms, his HUD flashing red as systems around the city began to fail. First, it was subtle. Flickering lights, Emergency service drones malfunctioning, minor system glitches. But it spread fast, ripping through the digital veins of the city, taking down corporate systems, surveillance networks, and public infrastructure in one fell swoop. From his vantage point in the Steppin Razor, Raze watched as the city fell apart. Streetlights blinked out, leaving vast sections of the megacity in darkness. Neon signs flickered and died, their corporate messages fading into the black. The drones that patrolled the streets fell from the sky, sparking and twitching as they hit the pavement. And then the real chaos began. Panic spread through the lower levels first. The slums and back alleys where people depended on the automated systems to survive. Without power, without transport, the streets became battlegrounds. Gangs moved in to claim territory, looting what they could before anyone realized what was happening. Riots broke out as supplies dwindled, and the weak were trampled in the chaos. But it was the Crool's districts where the virus hit hardest. The towers of the rich and powerful lost their shields, their defenses crumbling as Raze's virus tore through their security systems. Private security forces scrambled to contain the damage, but it was too late. Data vaults were compromised, trade routes severed, financial markets thrown into disarray. Raze watched it all unfold, his eyes scanning the chaos from behind the windshield of the Steppin Razor. This was his work, his decision. The corpos had built their empires on the backs of the weak, using them as fuel for their greed. Now, it was all coming down, but the price was high. Too high. Part 5. The Fallout. The city burned. Not in the literal sense. There was no fire or brimstone. But in the way systems failed and the world spiraled into a frenzy, Raze could feel it. The weight of his actions crushing down on him as he drove through the streets, watching the aftermath. The faces of the people in the lower districts told the story. They hadn't asked for this. They hadn't signed up for Raze's war. Yet here they were, caught in the middle. As the Steppin Razor sped through the deserted streets, Raze's mind churned. He'd stopped Nexus. Sure, Hyperion was in chaos. Their golden AI, their promise of total control, was a smoking wreck. But at what cost? The virus had done its job too well. It hadn't just crippled the corpos, it had crippled the entire city, and those who were already struggling were paying the heaviest price. Was this the only way? He muttered, looking up at the towering silhouette of the cityscape. The neon glow that once bathed the city in electric colors was now a flickering ghost, a dim reminder of the world that was. He thought of Trask. The old man had been a mentor, a father figure. Trask had believed in justice, in doing the right thing, even in a world as corrupt as this. What would he have said? Would he have supported this? Or would he have called Raze a fool blinded by revenge? But that was the thing about revenge. It consumed you. Raze knew that now. He'd let it guide him, let it twist his decisions. Maybe that made him just as bad as the corpos he fought against. Maybe. In the end, he was no different than the ones who used Trask as a scapegoat. The rain fell harder, washing away the grime on the street. But it couldn't wash away what had been done. The city was free of Hyperion's control, at least for now. But it was fractured, bleeding, struggling to breathe. And it wasn't the corpos who were suffering most. It was the people, the ones who were always caught in the crossfire. Raze leaned back in his seat, the weight of it all pressing down on him. He had his revenge. He'd stopped Nexus. But as he looked out at the shattered city, he couldn't help but wonder if he'd really won anything at all. He gripped the wheel of the Steppin Razor and started the engine. The streets ahead were uncertain, just like everything else. There would be fallout. There always was. Maybe Hyperion would regroup, rebuild. Maybe another corporation would rise from the ashes, just like they always did. But Raze, he was done. The game was over. He wasn't a hero. He never was. He drove into the night, the city smoldering in his rear view, leaving behind a world that might never be the same. The end.